So we're going to start in Syria, and I want to take you through some pictures that we're just getting in. These are believed to be images of opposition fighters on their way to Homs. So opposition fighters who just, as we said, took the city of Hama, now on their way going south towards Homs. Syria's third largest city used to be a major rebel stronghold until government forces captured it in 2015. So again, we're just getting these pictures, and this appears to be a significant development. Very, very rapid developments in the past week. Opposition fighters in Syria have taken two major cities. Aleppo, which is Syria's second largest city, the financial and economic hub. Then they took Hama, where we learned today that government troops withdrew from Hama, and we heard the gunshots of celebrations of the opposition fighters. And now, that last shot that we showed you of opposition fighters heading south towards Homs, which is 45 kilometers south of Hama. All of these roads, by the way, Aleppo, Hama, Homs, on the same highway, the M5 highway, that then leads to the capital, Damascus. All right. Let's go to our correspondent, Resul Serdar, who is in Kilish at the Syria-Turkey border. Resul, we're going to try and figure out with you how significant this is, but let's start with the facts on the ground. What are you hearing based on, again, in the context of this latest footage that we're getting of opposition fighters going from Hama to Homs? You told us last hour and the hour before that that was their goal. They want to bridge that gap, go 45, 50 kilometers south, and after they've captured Hama, which they did today, they want to capture Homs. What do you know about what's happening now?
Indeed, it was just a little after the noon time that the opposition forces started to enter some neighbors of the city from the eastern side. Just remember, it has been quite a couple of days that the opposition forces, after taking control of Aleppo, the second largest city of Syria, then they started to march toward Hama, the fourth largest city. The march started from Idlib directly to the south, and they started to enclave the city from three sides, north, west, and east. However, there was a huge resistance of the government forces, particularly at the north side, and particularly around the mountain that is called Zain al-Abidin, and also the town of Kumhane. Now, the opposition forces are confirming that that mountain and that town also is completely under their control. And so today, just after noontime, the opposition forces start to get into the city from the eastern side. The reason that we are talking about that, why eastern side? Because in the western side still, there are some of the enhancements and some of the defense lines of the Syrian government. But the east side was where the regime forces or the government forces were extremely weak and vulnerable. And the opposition took advantage of that, and they got into the city, and then they rapidly advanced to the city center. Now, the social facilities, the health facilities, governmental buildings, every part of the city is completely under the control of the opposition forces, and they have officially announced that. On the other hand, the Syrian government also confirming that it has withdrawn its forces and repositioned them outside of the city. However, the question is there, where outside the city? Because now we know that between the city of Hama and Homs, which is 45 kilometers further south, there are no major towns. And where are going to be these new military positions of the government forces is not clear. Because it was not only Hama city center that has been taken by the opposition, but also they have taken full control of Hama military airport. And that is extremely important, maybe as equal as important of taking over the control of the city, because that military base, that air base, Hama air base, has been used by the Syrian government so intensively since the civil war in Syria has begun in 2011. And the aircrafts that were flying from that airport has been bombing and crashing the opposition over a course of a decade. So now the government forces have lost that important strategic air base, and it means that their capacity of flying the aircrafts to target, to strike the opposition forces is significantly limited, is significantly reduced. And now the opposition is taking over that advantage. There are no serious airstrikes that can stop their advance. That's why they're taking this opportunity and now further marching to the south, city of Homs, which is the third largest city of Syria. And if they manage to take over that, that is going to be completely changing the whole picture.
Resul, you may not have an answer to this because this is a very rapidly moving story. It's all very fluid at the moment. And as you said, there's a pretty short distance between Hama and Homs. But as you speak, we're looking at these very latest pictures that we got from the highway. We understand this to be the highway between Hama and Homs. Look, it's a very short clip, but it's significant, which is why we're playing it. And what we're seeing is a long line of vehicles, including some military vehicles. There's a pickup truck with armed men at the back. And we understand that this is part of the opposition groups heading towards Homs. What are you hearing, if anything, on your end about movement of opposition fighters towards Homs?
Well, indeed, it's both opposition forces, but also many people have left the city as well, Hama as well. Just let's not forget, there have been some of people, residents of Hama, who have been celebrating the takeover of the opposition. But on the other hand, there were some pro-government people also that were afraid of their security, and that's why they left that. So right after taking over the city of Hama, the opposition is not losing the time. They know that if they give time to the government forces, they will regroup and maybe enhance and enforce their defense lines. So they do not want to give that opportunity to the government forces. That's why rapidly, right after taking the control of the city of Hama, now they're marching toward the south, toward the city of Homs. And it's not only those who taken over the city. More and more opposition fighters are coming now from Aleppo and also from Idlib, the northern part of the country, down to the south to Hama, and then now they're marching toward Homs. So, and that's not only that at the moment. In Homs, we are getting some reports that some of the government officers are already evacuating their families, and some of the officers are leaving their posts, and people of Homs, that is just 45 kilometers south of Hama, people are also now starting to leave the city of Homs as well. So that is going to make Homs as an easy target.
Rasul, pause for a second, because I think pause for a second, Rasul, because we're seeing. Hold on, we're seeing what I think you're describing right now, which we are seeing footage that is near Homs or could be in Homs. We'll get you more details on that very soon, but just want to make sure our viewers understand what they're seeing on their screen. We're seeing footage near Homs of a massive traffic jam. And that appears to be consistent with what you're describing of pockets of population leaving the city of Homs before the rebel advance. So I think we can start to connect those dots, and they would be leaving towards coastal areas which are under government control. Resul?
That is correct. So some of them are moving to the coastal areas. We are talking about the city or the town of Tartus and the city of Latakia. The Mediterranean coastal region has been the stronghold of the Syrian government. And also some of the people are moving toward the capital as well. So taking over Homs, why it is so much important for the opposition. If the opposition managed to get the control of Homs, that practically and effectively will split the government-controlled areas. So it will mean that the government-controlled areas at the Mediterranean coast and the government-controlled areas starting from Damascus until Deir ez-Zor, these two parts are going to be disconnected. So what it means for the Syrian government, it means that they are practically losing more than half of the country in terms of the population and in terms of the lands. And for Iran, which is one of the main backers of the Syrian government, for them also it means they losing their land bridge, Syria, simply that is connecting Iraq, Iran, and Lebanon. For Russia, that is also extremely important because Russians, particularly at the Mediterranean coastal cities of Tartus and Latakia, they have two major military bases. Now, as the opposition is marching toward Homs, now these two Russian bases are also in a huge risk for Russia as well. So that's why the things are really moving extremely rapidly. And the new Syria that is now we're seeing is an extremely different Syria that we have seen a week ago. So as I said, as now, not only the Syrian government officers and their families and some of the military officers are leaving the city of Homs and heading toward the western part of the country, the coastal cities, and also down further down south to the capital city, Damascus, but also people, many residents of the city of Homs are also leaving the city. That, as I said, is making the city of Homs extremely vulnerable and, of course, increasing the chances of the opposition to take control of the city.
Resul, if we go back to Hama, which opposition fighters took today, and the Syrian forces, the Syrian military confirmed that they withdrew from Hama, what information do you have on what's happening inside Hama? I asked specifically, I'm specifically interested in what is happening to civilians there.
Well, that is also an interesting angle of this new case. So this opposition that has taken over the control of the city of Aleppo, the second largest city of Syria, and now Hama, the fourth largest city of Syria, and that's now marching toward the third largest city, Homs. So this opposition is led by HTS, which is Hayat Tahrir Sham, and Hayat Tahrir Sham is formerly known as the Nusra Front, and before that it was linked to Al-Qaeda. However, starting from 2016 on, it has transformed remarkably. And through the last 7 days, 8 days, we again and again repeatedly received the announcements and the statements from Hayat Tahrir Sham's leader, Mohammed Julani, and saying that their forces are going to be merciful. Their act is not based on the revenge. So Syria belongs to everyone, different approaches, different backgrounds, different ethnicities, and so on. They are giving the guarantees, security guarantees to the Christians, to the Shiite populations, to the Alawite population, to the Sunnis, and so on. Again and again, they're emphasizing that Syria is a mosaic and it belongs to all of the Syrians. So this is quite a new element. This is showing the huge transformation of HTS-led opposition through the years as well. Because just remember, many analysts will say, well, the so-called Syrian revolution has been hijacked by the radical movements. So now HTS and the forces that are aligned with it are trying their best to show that they are not a threat, particularly to the civilians, and they are seeking for the public consent. And even today, there has been some of the reports that HTS is saying that, well, after taking the full control of these cities, after expelling the government forces out of these cities, they are not going to rule over these cities militarily, but rather there will be civil councils that are going to run the affairs of these cities. And also today, we have once again we have seen the statements directly made by the leader of these opposition forces, Mohammed Julani, giving specific guarantees to the Shia populations and the Christian population of the city of Hama. Having said that, as I said today, there have been mixed reactions. When the opposition forces entered Aleppo and entered Hama, we have seen that many people welcoming the opposition forces, celebrating their takeover of the city. But on the other hand, a significant portion of the society that are loyal to the government are also having fears of their safety. They do not know what the future is going to bring to them. That's why they are leaving these cities. So, as I said, as of now, one thing is clear, though. We are not seeing that bloodshed as much as the bloodshed that we have seen in 2016, 15, 14, and before that. So it is relatively, this war and this expansion of the opposition is happening with less bloodshed. And there are two important factors for that. First, the opposition is much more organized now, And it seems that they got more mature. They've realized that Syria belongs to all Syrians. But on the other hand, the Syrian government and Russia, they do not have the power that they had in 2016. Remember, when the Syrian government was heavily bombing the opposition forces in east of Aleppo in 2016, they almost leveled down that part of the city, and it was backed by the heavy Russian airstrikes. Now, what is confirmed is that Russia has only 4 strike aircrafts. And the Syrian government, on the other hand, the aircrafts that are being used by them are quite old, outdated MiG-23s. And there are almost no effective helicopters that are chasing after the opposition. As I said, that is giving a huge advantage to the opposition forces. But on the other hand, it is significantly decreasing the number of the civilian losses also in this battle. Having said that, so the civil defense center that is affiliated to the opposition has just today said that through the last 7 days, as a result of the Russian and the Syrian government's airstrikes, 94 people have been killed and 320 people have been injured. But as I said, when you compare the figures to what happened in the first 4 years of the Syrian civil war, it's relatively less now.
Okay, Resul, Syrian rebel chief Abu Mohammed al-Jolani, whose fighters have launched a lightning offensive, on Thursday urged Prime Minister Mohammed Shia al-Sudani of neighboring Iraq to keep his country distant from Syria's war. All right, that's another data point that I want to introduce in this conversation, because there are many groups from different countries and different regional powers that are involved in the Syrian situation. And what this means here, and this is information we got just this afternoon, is that the head of the opposition groups, Mohammed al-Jolani, has urged Iran-affiliated Iraqi groups not to join the fight against them in Syria. So if you're having trouble following it, it's completely normal. There are many groups involved, but we will run you through it. Resul, I have a question for you. I'm going to ask you the question, you think about it, and just after that, I'll do a little recap for our viewers. Can you give us some context on Homs, the city that the Syrian opposition fighters are now targeting? All right, can you pull together what our viewers need to know about Homs? I'll come back to you in just 30 seconds, but it's 17:18 GMT, and I want to recap for our viewers what we're looking at. It all looks a little messy, a little confusing, because this is a very rapidly developing situation. For context, the Syrian opposition fighters, which had not really made any significant military movements in the last 4 years since they agreed to a ceasefire that was brokered by Russia and Iran back in 2020, just in the last week, have seized 2 major cities. First, it was Aleppo a few days ago, Syria's second largest city, economic hub, financial hub of the country. And then it was Hama. Just today, we got the confirmation they're in the town. And those are the pictures you're looking at right now. Exclusive footage. This is inside Hama, hours after the opposition fighters took the city. So you see some celebrations, you see both civilian and some military vehicles driving around. That's what Hama looks like. If we can move on to the next set of pictures that we got, and it's not much, but it's something, you're seeing this long line of vehicles. This we understand to be opposition fighters heading from Hama to Homs. This is near Homs. So they're heading south towards, along the M5 highway from Hama to Homs. And the next set of pictures we can show you appears to show people fleeing. Again, this is in Homs or near Homs. This is people fleeing as they heard that opposition fighters were heading towards them. And you heard Resul, who's on the line with us, and I'll be back with you in just a second, Resul. You heard Resul report that government officials were packing up their belongings, or at least fleeing, leaving their offices, their families, etc., are all heading either towards the capital Damascus or towards the coast, Latakia, Tartus. So there is panic, it appears, setting in Homs. All right, that's the context at 17:20 GMT. Resul, back to you. Homs used to be known as the capital of the Syrian revolution. What can you tell us about Homs that our viewers need to know at this point?
Indeed. So it is the third largest city in Syria. And it has a very dramatic past as well, by the history. Syria, just to remind to our viewers, Homs was one of the cities that have seen one of the most severe humanitarian crises right after the Syrian civil war has started. It remained almost for 3 years under the siege of the Syrian government and the forces that was backing the government, the Damascus government. And I remember back then, while we were covering Syria, seeing the dramatic scenes of people, hungry people, trying to find out foods on streets and digging and so on. So, or cooking the grasses to feed their children and so on. That dramatic things that images are still vivid. And also, lifting the siege of Homs was one of the negotiating points between the parties for years during the negotiating table that was set in Geneva. So now, almost like 8 years later, the opposition forces are rapidly heading toward that city. So Homs has such a history, but as I said, it is the third largest city, and it is also another major city that is taken on M5 highway, which is the most important highway in the country. It is directly connecting the north of the country, starting from Aleppo, then going to Hama, then going to Homs, and then connecting to the capital, Damascus. So M5, the most important highway, connecting the north of the country to the south. So Homs is on that highway as well. So if the opposition gets the control of Homs, so that means the 3 major cities among 4 on M5 highway are going to be being taken under control by the opposition. And then from Homs onward, it's the Syrian capital, Damascus, 180 kilometers away, further south. And there are no major defense lines, no major towns that the government forces could use. So, as I said, if they take over the control of Homs, then the Syrian capital, Damascus, also is going to be an extremely in a vulnerable situation there. And also,
stop there for a second, Resul. Can we probe that for just a little bit, Resul? So you've mentioned this a couple of times. I understand this from a logical standpoint. You're saying, look, if they keep going down the highway and they take Aleppo, they have Idlib, obviously, they already had it. Then they take Hama, as they did today. Then they take Homs. That's an if. They haven't taken the Homs yet. And you're saying that if that happens, that would then leave the capital, Damascus, in a vulnerable position. Look, taking the second largest city, taking Hama, taking Homs, those are all, if they happen, achievements, and some of them already have, achievements for the opposition fighters. Taking the capital would be a very different proposition altogether, I would expect. I mean, how realistic is this? How feasible is this idea that they may actually really seriously target Damascus?
Absolutely, it is an unknown story. It's absolutely uncertain for now. But just remember, 10 days ago, if anyone will tell, well, the whole status quo that remained in place since 2016 on, when the Syrian government, by the help of Russia and Iran, took over control of Aleppo, that status quo, that case will shattered like days later, and that the opposition will take the full control of the city of Aleppo, which even during the peak time of the Syrian civil war, the opposition has never been able to take the full control of the city because it was just partly controlling, particularly the eastern part of the city. And even in the city of Hama, during the peak of the Syrian civil war in 2012, 13, and 14, the opposition has never been able to take the control of the city of Hama. And now, within days, they took control of these 2 cities. So a week ago, 10 days ago, if someone has told that to the people, perhaps it wouldn't make much sense. So this is showing a new nature of Syria. So we can see that the Syrian government is not the Syrian government of 2016. And definitely Russia doesn't have that capacity it had in 2016 because it's extremely busy in Ukraine, and it has withdrawn lots of its forces and equipment to be used in Ukraine at the front lines. On the other hand, one of the Syrian government's main backers, Iran, also is not in the same position. Just in the course of last year, Israel has been targeting the Iranian positions, the Syrian government positions, targeting their top officials, targeting their military men, those who were experienced in the battleground. And also another major backers of the Syrian government, Hezbollah, has been quite reduced. Their capacity has been reduced by the Israeli airstrikes and Israeli military operations. So now that's why the Syrian government is in a much more fragile position when you compare that to a year ago and 2 years ago. That's why everything seems possible. However, by every calculation, HTS-led opposition, just starting from Idlib and then rapidly taking over the second largest city, then the fourth largest city, and then now marching toward the third largest city, and then clearly expressing their willingness and their aim that they will eventually try to capture the capital is surrealistic. However, the things that has happened in Syria in the last couple of days, in the last 7-8 days, are already quite surrealistic. But as I said, as of now, what we can see is that the Syria that we are seeing now is an extremely different Syria that we have seen a week ago. And by the way, while that has happened, you just have said that the leader of HTS, Mohammed Julani, today also responds to the statements that has been made by the Iraqi Prime Minister. He said that Iraq should remain neutral. This is an internal issue of Syria, and it should be handled by Syrians, and that's why he has been calling that. So that's also showing another nature of the new opposition here. So they are not only assuring the civilians and the Christians, the non-Muslims, the Shia communities of Syria in terms of the guarantees. They are also giving guarantees to the regional powers and their neighboring countries as well, that their advance, rapid advance, is not a threat to the regional status quo, but rather they are just aiming to bring the Syrian government down. And as you also said, another statement that is in parallel with this kind of statement came from Muqtada Sadr, a powerful Shia cleric and leader from Iraq, calling on Iraqi government to remain neutral and not interfere in Syrian domestic affairs. On the other hand, we have been talking about Iran and Russia, but there are two other major players as well here, Cyril, with Turkey and the United States of America. So for Turkey, for them, the priority was to take the control of the north, or to create a buffer zone between itself and the regime and the Kurdish forces. And just while this was all happening, 2 days ago, the opposition forces took the control of Tel Rifat, which is another important strategic town at the north of Aleppo that has been taken from the Kurdish fighters as well. So when it comes to Americans repeatedly through the last week, they have been accusing the Syrian government of not participating to the peace process candidly. And they're saying that as a result of this lack of seriousness, the opposition is now rapidly advancing toward the capital and taking the cities after the cities. So the status quo of the last 8 years, the case of the last 8 years, situation has collapsed. And each of the major stakeholders in Syria, because Syria is a very crowded international scene, so these major players, Russia, Iran, Turkey, United States, they all are recalibrating their movements and repositioning themselves, because this is a new Syria in any way. And also, there is another question whether the Syrian government forces could really hit back and retake the control of the cities. I will say it will be extremely difficult, because just remember, when the opposition took just eastern parts of Aleppo in 2012, it took 4 years of the Syrian government to retake it from the opposition. And by almost leveling down by the airstrikes, artillery shelling, for years and years, they have been, after 4 years, the Syrian government has been able to retake the control of Aleppo. So now, while the Syrian government is in a weaker position, why Iranians are in a weaker position, why the capacity of Hezbollah, another major backer of the Syrian government, is in a weaker position, why Russian military equipment is less. So there is no indicator that the Syrian government will rapidly reorganize, regroup, and hit back hard and retake the control of these cities. And also, since 2020 on particularly, the opposition that was concentrated in the city of Idlib, almost the only stronghold of the opposition, they have been training, they have been updating their equipments, they have been reviving their strategies and working on the weaknesses of the Syrian government as well. So while their opposites are in a weaker position, so the opposition forces seems to be in a better position regarding their equipments and regarding their organizational skills and military operations.
Resul, there's a question I want to ask you about the HTS, which, as you've explained, is the leader of this coalition of opposition forces. You've explained who they were. They're former Jabhat al-Nusra, former al-Qaeda. You've explained that since 2017, they've transformed their politics and their worldview, so to speak. But the question is about militarily. What can you tell us about them militarily? Because it's quite remarkable what they've been able to achieve over the last week, right? They're facing the Syrian military. They're facing the Russian military to some extent. We understand that Russians are occupied in Ukraine. We understand that the Syrian military has been degraded as well as Hezbollah and to some extent Iran's capabilities. We understand all of that. Nonetheless, what can you tell us about HTS militarily? What's the best estimate of how many fighters they have, what kind of weaponry, what kind of equipment they have, and what are their military capabilities?
Well, so HTS, or formerly known as al-Nusra Front, has been fighting ISIS, has been fighting several other Syrian opposition fractions and so on. And it's relatively led by a young leader, Mohammed Jolani, who was born in 1981. So, but it somehow has been able to manage always to remain as an important player when it comes to Syria. They have been fighting almost everyone. And there has been some days that many people believe that they are going to be diminished, they're going to be absolutely destroyed. But then more and more, they have been concentrating their power in the city of Idlib. Remember in 2016, when the Syrian government forces were pounding east of Aleppo and backed by the Russian air strikes. So the main power that was fighting over there also was al-Nusra Front back then, al-Nusra Front, and now it is Hayat Tahrir Sham, or HTS. So they have been withdrawn from the city of Aleppo and headed toward the city of Idlib. It was based on an agreement that has been reached between the Syrian government, Iran, Russia, and Turkey. They have been evacuated on the green buses. Look, this is also another interesting strategy that's backfiring, because since 2016 on, the Syrian government has been taking the rebels, the opposition fighters across Syria and gathering all of them into Idlib, thinking that once they are just here, there's going to be an easy target and it's going to be easy to deal with them. But after that, they started their trainings, more equipments coming from various countries, particularly Turkey has been their lifeline, and their training as well. But recently, when we are seeing the warfare, the weapons that they are using, we are seeing much more tanks. We are seeing them using the new artillery systems. We are seeing them that they have advanced, they have almost masterpiece, the new drones that are being created by the 3D technology. And that's why they are now in a better position of attacking the Syrian government forces. And even today, there was another report that later has been confirmed by the Syrian government itself, saying that they have shot down 2 drones that were flying over the capital city, Damascus. So it means now that these opposition forces, this HTS, is able to fly their drones over the capital, roughly now 200 kilometers south of where they are. So we can see that their military capacity has increased dramatically. So there is definitely not a healthy figure, that a trustable, reliable figure that will tell us how many of the fighters were in Idlib. But roughly, there was an estimate or a number, a figure that the experts were agreeing on. We're saying roughly it is around 60,000 fighters, and they will say that 80% of that belonged to HTS. Because just let's remember, we are saying HTS-led opposition. It's not only HTS. In the city of Idlib or Idlib province, there are several other Syrian opposition factions as well. For example, like Sultan Murad Brigade or Nurettin Zengi brigades as well. However, HTS has been the main power militarily controlling the city of Idlib, and now it has been the main the main group that has been dominating, leading, conducting, drawing the plans in the takeover of the city of Aleppo and now Hama, and now the forces that are heading toward Homs. Another thing is that after all of these successes, many of the Syrian opposition factions are now joining them. That's why we are seeing the march of the new brigades from Aleppo, from the city of Idlib, from various parts of Syria, from the north, now heading toward the city of Hama and then joining HTS. But now HTS is facing a dilemma. How is that going to get rid of its past, being linked with Al-Qaeda? And now that's why they're saying that these are the scenarios that they are discussing, and now also making it public as well. They might give up on the name HTS, and they might join the internationally recognized Syrian opposition, or forming a new kind of administration, and also seeking for this for the legitimacy as well. But as I said, for now, at least what is confirmed is that they have over 40,000 fighters, and more fighters are joining them as they are marching toward the south.
Resul, listen, thank you very much for all of that. You've been walking us through all these latest developments on this very rapidly developing story for the last 30 plus minutes. And again, we're showing these latest pictures that we have from what appears to be Syrian opposition fighters who have taken Hama today and who are now heading south towards the city of Homs, where people are now fleeing since they've heard that opposition fighters were on their way to take the city. Al Jazeera's Resul Serdar, I will let you work your sources, work the phones, news gather, and we'll talk to you again very soon. Thank you very much for that, Resul.
Make sure to subscribe to our channel to get the latest news from Al Jazeera.